On November 17, 2016, upon the completion of its beta run, a brand new mobile game would be released to the Japanese market by Konami Holdings Corporation.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links!
The game would begin its life as a Japan-exclusive title, but would eventually see a worldwide release on January 11th of 2017. At that time, I was still a university student, right in the middle of my junior year of studies. Though I was satisfied with my educational experience, I was bored in real life. I had begun to feel the pangs of nostalgia, pining for simpler times when all that was important was on TV, on the playground, or in our video games. So, on launch day, I downloaded the app and officially made my return to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise. And ever since that day, I've rediscovered my lost love for the card game that defined my earliest years. But for many players, the question remains, how did we go from this to this? Just like the TCG it was birthed from, Duel Links has undergone a huge shift from its original concept to the digital card game titan it is today. And with the community entering the 4th year of the game's existence, I thought it'd be relevant to take a step back and look at the whirlwind of history that Duel Links has created over those 4 years. So, welcome to the History of Duel Links, a series where I, your lovely tour guide from the 4chan basement, Diatonic, will guide you through the major set releases, updates, and expansions that have forged Duel Links since its inception, and discuss how things have changed, and, in a surprising number of cases, how they've stayed the same. So, without further ado, let's go all the way back to the year 2017 to the original release of the game. In a period dominated by frogs, metalfoes, ABCs, and even some heroes, the release of Duel Links was like a breath of fresh air for many TCG players. Rather than focusing on an ever-increasing arsenal of summoning mechanics, insane combos that could take minutes to complete, and the creation of unbreakable boards, this scrappy little digital TCG was offering a massive injection of nostalgia. It was aimed at providing relief to those who didn't enjoy where the TCG was, and bringing back tons of fans of the original TV series and old game, like me. The game released with just a handful of characters from the first generation of Yu-Gi-Oh! And a single main box, the Ultimate Rising. It introduced us to the overall philosophy behind the game in its earliest stages, recreating the childhood duels you once had many moons ago. As you could guess, with the star of this box being Blue Eye's Ultimate Dragon, Duel Links started off with many of the same offerings as the original card game. However, rather than simply copy and paste LOB into this game, Konami opted to mix in some modern cards and retrains that held a power level comparable to the classics. Take for example Sphere Karibo. The best we could hope for back in the day of TCG was a regular Karibo, or maybe even its winged variant, but this card is far from OP in the rogues gallery of monsters we had back then. And, believe it or not, this card is still heavily played in a variety of decks. It would eventually see a reprint, but I think this card is a prime example of why it's so important to look back through the history of the game. You never know when an old card will find a way to make a comeback. For most, Duel Links was just a fun game where you could hear Yugi and Kaiba scream their traditional lines at one another and relive the days of Duelist Kingdom and Battle City, but with you in control of the action. Without a competitive scene or even a real established meta, that was the main, and basically only, selling point. And sell it did. The game managed to smash 25 million downloads by the end of January, proving just how much of a powerhouse the game would become. 25 million seems like a far cry from the 100 million they'd reach within a few years, but it raised eyebrows at the company and around the globe. So, the next step was obviously to monetize. How exactly were they going to entice players to buy these packs with real money as opposed to saving up their precious gems? In the beginning of the game, Duel Links' box and pack system was a bit confusing, and even to this day it can trip up new players. Basically, within a single box there are a finite number of packs and a finite number of each card. So, rather than blindly pulling into the void and praying for something good, in essence, you know you'll end up with something. Eventually. Players have the power to reset the box at any time, refilling the packs and cards at no cost as many times as he or she likes. You could buy a single pack, pull what you needed, and reset, or buy through the entire box and wait for the automatic reset at the end. As previously stated, the Ultimate Rising was the game's first main box, meaning it contained more important core cards and a larger pool to pull from. Unfortunately, as the game was still too new, there isn't a lot of coverage of these early boxes, particularly in the review department. But let's flip through a few of the more interesting pieces and see what the heck's even left to talk about. Well, let's take a look at the head honcho himself first, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. Now, when you start Duel Links for the first time, you get the choice between two characters to start with, Yami-Yugi or Seto Kaiba. You'll unlock the other eventually, but this determines what you'll be playing first, either Dark Magician or Blue Eyes White Dragon. Back then, Kaiba was just objectively the better choice. Blue Eyes was a better card in every way, and with this release, he was already getting support. So sorry Blue Eyes haters, this boy has been getting support since the very beginning of the game. But I'd say that in general, aside from the nostalgia of such a crazy card, it really didn't matter that much, and still don't. Even back then, aside from simply having the right to own him, there wasn't much appeal. It was too unreliable to build a deck around, and it's just too vanilla to do much these days. But hey, super cool, and it fit right with the stuff they wanted to release for the game. We've already touched on Sphere Kuriboh, so I won't go too far into that, but he's seen play since the early days of the game. He's just a good little card that even to this day your opponent can't do too much about. If they attack, they're at risk of getting hit with this absolute round boy. Axe Raider, an absolutely iconic meme that some people still try to force in 2021. 1700 vanillas back then were very solid plays, with little your opponent could do to stop him if he hit the board. Of course, vanillas have basically gone the way of the dodo in modern TCG and Duel Links, but it's always fun to see this guy. Especially as an Ultra Fusion Gate, a card that, I kid you not, still sees a fair amount of play more than 4 years later. Cyber Dragons love this thing, and without a reprint, it's all but guaranteed that you'll be cracking packs of this classic set to get it. It was a solid alternative to Poly back then, and can serve as a great engine in the modern game. Sonic Bird, while not an incredibly popular pick, still has its place in Rogue tier decks. I personally see his monster-searching counterpart played in decks like Megalith and Cyber Angel, but Bird isn't the worst. And hey, he's even been reprinted! He was also included as part of a ritual-focused bundle. Wonder Balloons was actually a card that was utilized quite a bit in the early days, hoping to try and melt away enough of Axe Raider or Blue Eyes' attack to get over it, but this card is all but gone nowadays. For the ancient gear fans out there, cards like Magical Hats and Twister are lower tier back row that can help you pop Gear Town and summon Reactor Dragon. I could definitely still see cards like this getting used in Ranked, but there are far better alternatives in today's game if you want better results. While Karate Man sees absolutely zero play in the current game, he was used alongside Twin Swords of Flashing Light Trice and Secret Pass to the Treasures in the game's first OTK. Yes, that's right, ever since Main Box 1 we've had OTKs in Duel Links. Far too unreliable to run now, but back when Control was rare, this dude was a real threat. White Elephant's Gift was released in this set, and it lives on in decks like Ojama, but it's mostly relegated to farm decks nowadays. I honestly can't remember if this thing saw much play back then, but I imagine as a draw card, it probably got played here and there. I vividly remember people playing Crash Clown and Dream Clown as a deck, using cards like Earthquake to wipe out your opponent's monsters or put big bosses back into their hand. I almost want to say I recall seeing a version of that deck a month or two ago actually managing to hit King of Games. So hey, maybe there's a sleeper strat in old boxes like this just waiting to be souped up to modern speeds. The last card I want to highlight here is the aforementioned Secret Pass to the Treasures. It's actually limited down to 2 copies and is mostly spotted in farm decks, used to earn a high duel assessment and unlock skills. It just seems crazy to me that there are cards all the way back from Ultimate Rising that are still locked away on the ban list. So, should you invest in Ultimate Rising today? Well, by itself you really won't get much out of it. This was long before complete archetypes were being introduced, and we were mostly just cobbling decks together with whatever we could. There are some definite pickups from this set, things like Sphere Kuriboh and Fusion Gate, but I wouldn't exactly call this one a must-buy. However, unlike some sets we're going to be looking at in the future, there's still some good stuff here. I'd say that you should buy the bundle that includes Sphere Kuriboh first, then wait for selection boxes to return if you're really inclined to spend money on the game. The selection boxes were kind of designed to phase out old boxes like this after all. But if you're in desperate need or digging for fusion gates, I'd say this honestly isn't the worst investment. Plus, it does have a bit of value as a fun opening, since you get to see what came from the very first booster. In my opinion, I think I'd put this box at something like a C tier. It's very middle of the road, Goldilocks zone and all that. There's some good cards that you can still use to this day, but there's plenty of junk that will never leave your trunk. That rhymed. I'm a poet, and I didn't even know it. In a time where traditional TCGs weren't exactly keen on attempting the jump to a digital format, games like Hearthstone dominated. It'd be hard to simply produce a product that emulated the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game, and Konami knew that. They took full advantage of fast-paced mobile gameplay, anime nostalgia, and popularity of card games in the digital world to make this game. But, how was it received upon launch? Well, unfortunately, apps don't often get review scores, but it clocked in at an 80 on Metacritic, with sites like AppAdvice and Pocket Gamer UK going so far as to give it a 90. In fact, Pocket Gamer sang the game's praises, at least in the presentation department. The article's author, Sophia Audrey Drake, wrote, "The thing is though, no matter how good the gameplay is, or how easy to use the interface is, and trust me, they're both second to none, the real star here is the flawless presentation. The game was, and still is, dripping in the same flair that made the anime so appealing all those years ago, and to this very day. It was an immersive game where you can see the monsters, hear the voices, and live the moments from the show." A point that AppAdvice writer Christine Chan noted the game could work on is the difficulty curve against AI duelists, citing a fairly low challenge level early on. Of course, this was somewhat bandaged by the easy availability of opponents through the game's ranked and casual duel systems, but this ease of difficulty against computer opponents still exists, and is even more exacerbated if you jump right into the Duel Links metagame and start building optimized decks right away. So, in a marketplace that was once believed to be locked down by games like Blizzard's Hearthstone and Cygames' Shadowverse, Konami positioned themselves as a very credible opponent in the mobile market arena, rocketing past games like Wizards of the Coast's Magic the Gathering Online in revenue just after launch, and accruing nearly 1/4 of Shadowverse's revenue right away. Essentially, Konami had a hit on their hands, and it wasn't just analysts and journalists who could see that, they could too. They now had a legitimate, official, digital companion to their long-running trading card game, and they were certainly about to run with it. And that's where we'll leave things for now. A successful launch, a skyrocketing player base, and the general question of where do we go from here? Next time on the history of Duel Links, we'll be covering the follow-up to the game's first box, the formation of its earliest metagame, and how Konami began paving the way for the game's 4+ year future. That's all for now. I've been Diatonic, roll outro. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. Your support means a ton, and if you'd like to support me even more, it'd be great if you left a like and comment on this video, as well as smacking that subscribe button so you know when the next video is ready for you. Also, I'm live 4 days a week over at my Twitch channel with plenty of Duel Links content. I've always got an open duel room for you, and I even run a tournament every Saturday where you can win a free sub to the channel, so feel free to stop on by, we'd love to have you. Who knows, you might even be featured in my next video. As always, I hope you have a great day. I've been Diatonic, signing off.